Good afternoon, everybody. The long-awaited 2025 federal budget is out, and as you can see up on the screen, my name's Dave Price. I'm the Director of Sales here at SVN Rock Advisors. After today's webinar or during, if you have any questions, comments, you want to talk further about anything related to the budget or other topics on your mind, you can see my contact details up on the screen. Don't hesitate to reach out. We've got some upcoming, as you know, we like to keep you guys on top of strategies and things happening in the market. We've got a couple other webinars coming up in November on estate freezes, tax strategies, and later in the month, our Leasing Insights webinar on the 18th, which leads us into high performance leasing workshops. Get your leasing agents trained up, turn them from order takers into professional leasing agents. That starts on the 25th. Now, the must-attend event towards the end of the year on December 2nd is our Affordable Housing and Apartment Development Conference. That's a must-attend event. So that's some of the things that are coming up. Please join us and don't hesitate to ask any questions. Now, Rock Advisors. Many people know us as a brokerage firm, which we are, but we've got directors in multiple departments where we're servicing our clients from planning right through to leasing and stabilization. You can see the directors up on the screen there. We've got a whole team behind us that are here to help service your needs. And remember, at the end of this and throughout this webinar, if you've got any questions, please use the chat box in the webinar forum. We'll be able to answer those questions at the end of the webinar. We'll try to save some time, and we are recording this, so everybody that's in attendance will get access to the landing page with the recording of today's webinar. Now, I'd like to introduce you to Derek Lobo, our CEO here at SVN Rock Advisors, to get us started. Derek?
Okay, Dave, thanks very much. Hello, everyone. We had our budget last night. We're going to do a quick overview of the budget with a friend of ours, Dr. Mike Moffatt. Mike, and many of you know Mike from the Missing Middle Initiative at the University of Ottawa, and he speaks clearly and insightfully on financial matters related to rental housing. So Mike and I are going to sort of have a Q&A on what happened. But before we do that, let's just take a poll. Most of you saw the budget yesterday. You've maybe read a little bit on it. Give us your feedback on what type of budget you think this is. Just go ahead and vote. Good, bad, or neutral. Okay? And we'll post that in a minute and see what the results are. Sarah, we'll give it maybe 15, 20 seconds, and let's just see what the result is as to how we initially feel about this thing. Yeah, I mean, I don't think that, Mike, does that surprise you?
Yeah, no, I would say that's about what I expected. Good at 14% actually might be a little high.
Yes.
I found everyone's been either kind of neutral or bad, so that's
Yeah.
some optimism I haven't seen much of lately.
Yeah. Amen. Well, if I had to think of one word, I was going to say it's a nothing burger. Did you have one word to kind of describe what this was?
I would say disappointing. Yeah, I've used that term in a few media interviews, so I would say a bit of a
Yeah.
disappointment.
No.
And maybe
Fair enough.
same thing.
Fair enough.
I'm disappointed because it's a nothing burger.
Yes. Yeah. Fair enough. Okay, Sarah, next slide. So, Mike, we just want to go through with you sort of the key points of, like, what kind of budget is this? It's disappointing, neutral. We were looking for something more, but in a way, do we want more bigger government also, right? So, and then we want to have the budget highlights, and then Mike's got to leave at 2 o'clock. We're going to talk about what's next for the apartment industry and just sort of go on. So let's go full screen first. Okay. No, sorry. Go to the next slide. Next slide, Rod. Sorry. Mike, what we're going to put on the next slide is from the report that you just put out yesterday. This was the Liberal plan in their election platform. Just want to comment on this?
Yeah, so basically, if you look at where the money was going in the platform to housing, it was four big areas. The first is the cut for GST for first-time home buyers. That was announced by the government back in June. That's all going through. Build Canada Homes, a project we're all kind of aware of. That's undergoing, but the government scaled that back a little bit. There's a promise to cut development charges, which has also been scaled back a bit, and the MERB tax incentive, which does not appear in the budget, and we can talk about all of these later.
Mhm.
So, I would have to say of these four big initiatives, one is going through as planned, two have been scaled back, and the fourth is unfortunately absent in this budget. But wasn't a no so much as a not yet.
Yeah, yeah, no, not now. Okay, so let's go to full screen and let's just have a discussion on each one of these, Rod, with just me and Mike on the screen there. Okay, so let's talk about Build Canada Housing and what's the objective of Build Canada Housing and what did they change, what stayed the same, and so on, Mike.
Yeah, so Build Canada Homes is has a couple aims. That first, it is a program to build more low-income social housing and so on. But it's also kind of this recognition that if the federal government is spending all this money on procurement, they can use it as a tool of innovation to help innovative companies involved in modern methods of construction and so on. So in yesterday's budget announcement didn't really have anything new. It was kind of aligned with what was announced back in September. I guess what the difference is that in the platform they had announced kind of 11 billion for this initiative. What the budget says is that they'll only be spending about 6.8 billion. I was at the lockup, talked to official from the finance department who confirmed that really that they're still planning on rolling out these new buildings and so on, but it's a little bit slower than the Liberal Party had anticipated during the election campaign. So it's been kind of looked at that way, that it's not so much that we're going to do less, but it's taking us a little bit longer to get there than anticipated.
So from our perspective at Rock Advisors and me being, the president of the National Apartment Council, Mike, we want to remind people that 90% of all the rental housing in Canada is built by the private sector, right? And so you're spending no time or effort or resources on the 90% of who does the work. And logically, the past reveals the future. Who did in the past is likely who's going to do it in the future. The other thing that I thought was interesting was when I read the budget, there was this phrase in here. It said, we need an entirely new Canadian housing industry, right? And I'm not sure that's true. We need an industry to be unshackled. We need capital to be released. But Canadian developers, Canadian landowners, the commercial ownership fraternity knows how to build housing, right? Well, what's this thinking here of an entirely new housing industry? What do you think it is?
Yeah, so there was a graph in the budget that talks about productivity of the home building sector versus the other sectors of the economy, and where the government is thinking in this discussion that they have about changing the sector around increasing productivity around modern methods of construction is just that to increase the productivity of the sector. I would call I do think that they believe in the need for that, but I also think much of it is performative. There's not a lot that directly is dollars that are directly going to this level of innovation. Build Canada Homes, as I mentioned, kind of has this dual mandate between getting more social housing built and accelerating innovation. And it seems that as time goes on, any agency with a dual mandate always has to kind of figure out how to balance those off against each other.
Yes.
And I think it's becoming increasingly clear that the balance is more towards building social housing rather than it is accelerating innovation.
So, we all wish Build Canada Housing the best. It's our country, it's our money that you're using, but it seems that they're going to an either or an or. So they're saying either the private sector has historically built rental housing. Now they're saying the government should build it. Our view is that it should be not either or, it should be and, right? We are fully supportive of the government building social housing at rents that just don't work in the marketplace, but leave development to the private sector. So it's an and, I think, as well. Okay, well, good luck to Build Canada Housing and all the work that they're doing. And let's just see how interesting modular housing is. Because it seems that's one of their big initiatives.
Yeah, I do. I do think it is a focus, and again, we'll have to see how much gets done on that. President Biden was often fond of saying like, "Don't tell me what your priorities are. Show me your budget, and I'll tell you what your priorities
Yes.
are." And there's not that many line items in here directly that around innovation and building modular housing. So we'll have to see how many of these actually get built.
Yeah, let's wait and see. Okay, so there was a lot of talk about development charge relief, right?
Mhm.
And give us a thumbnail summary as to what they said.
Yeah, so the election platform made a commitment to cut development charges in half across the country for multi-unit residential. Now, they didn't define exactly where the cutoff is for multi-unit, but I would suspect it would be under the same criteria for ACLP or anything else. So either a cutoff of maybe 10 or 4 units, somewhere in that range.
Mm,
That has been replaced in the budget. Now it doesn't reference multi-unit at all. It doesn't reference having development charges. That language has been replaced to talking about substantial reductions in development charges. And what the government has put on the table is $12 billion that they're going to give provinces and municipalities for infrastructure, but in exchange, they would need to make some development charge reforms. Well, if you do the math there, 12 billion over 10 years is 1.2 billion a year, which is a little bit less than the 1.5 billion promised in the platform. So my big takeaway from that is there's less money, and the rhetoric and ambition has been dialed back somewhat.
yep, fair enough. The other thing I would note on the development charges, it's always got a 5-year clock on it. Fair enough.
Mhm.
And the apartment development cycle is probably 5 to 8 years. So, at a certain point, you're not gonna the programs are gonna run out. And if they bring in programs like this, they need to be longer term. 5 years is just not enough. Same with the HST exemption. It's 5 years. In 2031, it burns off, right? And so it's something to think about. All right. Okay, so let's talk about the MERB program. We've been, as the National Apartment Council, we've been advocating for the MERB program. It wasn't put in on the budget. What do you think happened there?
I think it's just competing priorities. That obviously the deficit has gone up in this budget. There's a lot of spending for defense, and I think that they're just trying to do a lot of things, and they're also trying to keep costs manageable. So whether it be Build Canada homes, development charges, the elimination of MERB. I mean, they've kind of shaved billions of promised dollars out of their housing program. So I think this is a combination of the government looking for cost savings, coupled with the fact that they've been in office but 6 to 8 months now. They're trying to do a lot of different things. My takeaway from the MER piece is that it's not a no, it's a not yet.
Yes.
That they haven't come out and explicitly said, "Hey, we're never going to do this," but rather it's kind of been pushed down the priority list. So I think it's important that it get put back up on that list, because I believe it worked really well in the 1970s, and I believe it could work well again.
Yeah, yeah, Mike, in the warm up here when we got on a little before, you talked about the importance of lobbying for something that could have a big impact, and you gave the HST example. Could you just repeat what you said? I thought that was a really good lesson for us who want something to happen, but we've got to commit time and money to it.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the 2015 Liberal platform, they had made the commitment to eliminate the HST on purpose-built rental. And I think there was this kind of assumption that it was just going to happen. There wasn't a lot of effort, whether that be government relations or even public relations, editorials in newspapers and so on. So what ended up happening was that the government in 2017 took the money they were going to use for that and put it into the national housing strategy, and put it more into social housing. And, I truly believe that had industry, spent a couple million here or there, they could have gotten that GST cut in 2016, which is worth, a billion a year. So that's a massive ROI the industry could have gotten, had it been willing and able to spend a couple million here and there on those initiatives, that would have been worth a billion a year. And you're not going to find a lot of better ROI than that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, no, no. And so the fact when you have the tailwind behind you, the government in their platform said we're bringing the program back. Our job is to educate them, motivate them, and advocate for bringing the program back, right? And this is we're playing the long game here in the apartment business, and that kind of goes with don't bring in policies for 5 years either, right? Because that's not long enough for what we're doing. Okay, so we've got a defined housing crisis. They chose to rather than creating supply, they're saying we're going to cut back on immigration, and that will improve demand. So are we going to start sending people home because there's already a problem? Like, what's the thinking here, do you think?
Yeah, and they made it explicit in the budget. I think there were at least five different references between housing shortages and past increases in immigration demand. And they use language like take back control of the immigration system, which normally I've never seen that from a government, let alone a liberal government. So they're making a clear connection here, and what the government has done is slightly reduce permanent residency targets and made big reductions in the number of non-permanent resident targets that non-permanent permits, so international students, temporary foreign workers, and so
Sure.
on. There's some pretty significant cuts there. So it's not so much about sending people back, but it's about reducing the number that come in the first place. Now, obviously, there's issues around enforcement. Do people overstay their visas and so on? But and I see a question in the chat. I mean, the government made explicit in the budget, they outright say that rents are down 3.2% over the last year, and
Yeah.
they cite their non-permanent resident changes as being a primary cause of that.
Do
So
you believe that?
I believe it played a reference. Yeah, I do think it's really kind of regional in nature, but somebody who teaches at a university, I've seen rents go down near universities and colleges. So I do think it makes makes a difference in specific markets. I don't think it's the only cause.
No,
I
Mike,
certainly think
it's a bit of
other
an
things are
it's a
happening.
bit of an oversimplification.
Yeah,
Where
I
you're
agree. I
seeing
agree.
the vacancy rate go up is on bachelor apartments and one bedroom apartments, where
Mhm.
you've got younger people where it's just not economically viable for them to rent an apartment. Fair enough. Where you're seeing tightening is in the three-bedroom apartments. People are forced to share, right? So what's happening is because of job loss, youth unemployment, low wages, young people are doubling up,
Mhm.
right? And they're going back home again, or they're renting apartments in a co-living scenario, right? So in Toronto, there are lots of one bedrooms and one bedrooms and dens that were, all the condos that were built. But the two bedrooms
Yeah.
and three bedrooms, and in fact, when three bedrooms get built, you're not building family housing, you're building roommate housing, right? And so I think it's wrong to imply that vacancy rates are easing and therefore the housing crisis is easing. We've got a soft economy right now, and yes, students are going home, and you will feel it in that area around universities, but that's not true across the board. It's an oversimplification. And the rents going down, well, quite frankly, rents went up significantly. I don't know, let's call the number 20%. And now they've come down 3%. I think in the margin of error, the standard deviation and things like that, that may not be what's really happening, right? So the problem is not going to solve itself if that's what they were implying.
Yeah, no, but I do. So I agree with all of that, and I think that the reality is far more complex than, a couple sentences in
Yes.
a budget. But I think what's more important is not the data and its accuracy, but I think it's what it signals about the government's thinking. And the government is clearly putting stakes in the ground that they're thinking of addressing these issues through reducing demand and reducing population growth rather than uh, increasing supply.
Right, right, right. That's not going to solve the problem. Those kids are going to want to come out of their parents' basements. They're going to want to get married. They're going to want to have children, right? And we need to build that supply. And it's got a long cycle in front of it. You don't just create it quickly, right? It's 5 years to get something built. So, so the thought to say rents are going down and vacancies are going up, the problem is getting solved is probably not true. Okay, last thing. Let's just
Yeah.
put up. Okay, so Mike, I know you've got a hard stop here at in 8 minutes, but Rod, let's put up a slide that just summarizes sort of the technical stuff from the budget. And Mike, you can comment on any or all of them if you want to.
Yeah, so I think a couple things worth noticing or worth noting is that they have increased the amount of capital that's available under the apartment construction loan program. I think that's a very good thing.
That is a good thing, yes.
That this is a good thing. They've increased the Canada mortgage bond limits, or how much they buy, how much the federal government purchases in these mortgage bonds. I think they've increased it from 60 to 80 billion. One
So
other
does
thing
that
that's
mean there's more
not
money for CMHC to loan out?
well under ACLP, yes.
Yes. Yep.
Under ACLP, yes. And one of the things that they did note is the budget does make a number of cuts to CMHC as part of this plan to reduce the size of the public service. But one of the things that they note is that ACLP will be exempted from that, or that it will kind of continue on as is. They made a couple other changes. They're eliminating the federal underused housing tax as of the end of this calendar year. Um, so there were some smaller changes that do fly under the radar, but of which do think the most important is that the recapitalization of ACLP. I think that's a very
Yes. Yeah.
important
Yeah.
thing.
Okay. Rod, next slide. Were there any misses, things that they were said they were going to do, they didn't do?
Yeah, well, I think we
Yep.
covered it. The scaling back these two things and not having MERB. I think those are the big things. I will say that one thing I should note about the development charge piece is that in order to implement the development charge piece, they're going to have to engage in negotiations with the province. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And I think the two orders of government have to co-design this thing. So I think there's kind of opportunity to talk about that. Hey, we think that the focus should be on this rather than that. That it should be on multi-unit residential, or it should be on focused on water and wastewater DCs versus library DCs, or something else. So, it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out, because it is, $12 billion over 10 years, 1.2 billion a year, and an active negotiation on how that money is going to be allocated.
Yep. Okay. All right. Okay. So, the one thing that also just kind of puzzles me is we keep talking about how we're going to solve the rental housing crisis. Fair enough. Development charges, modular housing, pre-approved floor plans and things like that. I don't even think, fine, we need to talk about, I don't think we've agreed as to who is going to solve the problem. And before you talk about how, you need to figure out who.
Some of it is government.
Yeah.
Um, I certainly think they would agree with that, but I do think there is this kind of meta problem, which is associated with your who and what problem is. The government has really not articulated what success looks like.
Yeah.
That they've announced these initiatives, and I couldn't tell you, and I don't think they could tell you. It's like, if we find ourselves in 2028, do we know if any of this stuff worked or not, or 2031 or 2038 for that matter?
Mhm.
So there seems to be this kind of lack of understanding what success looks like, because if you know what success looks like, then it's easier to answer those like who questions.
Hmm.
Okay, this is the housing system we're trying to create. Then we can get into, okay, who's doing what, and where should our attention be focused.
Yep. 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 Well said, Mike. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate you coming in and just giving us an overview of the legislation. Thanks a lot. So I'm going to talk a little about the National Apartment Council here. Of which, I'm running and setting up right now. We did make some pre-budget submissions, and it was interesting. 600 people made submissions. Groups made submissions to the federal government on this. And one of the things that we talked about was the importance of the MERB program, the importance of development charges, and the message that we're really hammering home is who's going to solve this problem. And I think people understand it, but it needs to be said many times. 90% of all the apartments in Canada are built by the private sector. That's who's going to solve our housing crisis, not the government. Okay, right, next slide. One thing that we've certainly been advocating for, and you'll hear us talk more and more about, is the MERB program. It's on the agenda. I think it's unrealistic to expect that the government, we have got so many problems in terms of tariffs, defense, housing, that everything could get done all at one time. But as an industry, we should be advocating to bring back the MERB program. Carney promised to build more housing. This is the fastest, cheapest, easiest way to build rental housing, to have the private sector do it, and that MERB legislation does it. And tenants, young Canadians, older Canadians, the renter pool is dumbbell shaped. They want a place to live, and one of the easiest places would be to bring back the MERB Council. Okay, so I'm gonna wrap up with for those of you that are apartment developers or have an interest in this sector of apartment development, then the National Apartment Council is the industry lobby group that is actively lobbying the current federal government. We've got the wind at our back. Everybody wants to see more rental housing built, and it should be built by people that are the members of the National Apartment Council and people like that. If there's any questions, we're happy to chat about them right now. Rod, maybe go full screen with everybody. But a little bit of a nothing burger budget, but quite frankly, philosophically, we didn't want to see the government spending a ton more money and building more bureaucracy. Rod, it felt a little like your spouse says to you, "I'm going to go out shopping and spend $10,000." Then they come home and say, "Oh, I only spent $5,000," and you're happy, right? That's kind of a little bit what this budget felt like, and that's why I think overall we gave it a neutral rating. Okay, and so keep in mind that I think as a country we still have to determine who is going to solve our rental housing crisis, and we're jumping into what we're going to build, and we haven't agreed whether it's the private sector or it's industry that's going to solve it. Right, Downsview Airport development. Yeah, I think that is moving into RFQ stage. I think you'll actually see it in the budget. So that's the request for qualifications. They're asking for developers to submit their background and their bio so that they can then go to the next step of building. The one interesting thing is that the Carney government has said that they are going to support larger projects, which is ironic because I can't remember this number exactly, but the average apartment building size in Canada is about 20 units, right? When you average them all out, for sure, there's a number of buildings, 240 units and so on, but the bulk of the supply of rental housing actually is smaller buildings, and it's not one solution. It's smaller and larger, not just larger mega projects. We're going to take a long time to get built, right? In terms of this budget has done nothing for the smaller developer. Okay. This is sort of we are going big and we're going to build. I think there's 9 sites have been identified across Canada. So there's nothing here particularly to help, I think, the smaller builders, the infill builders, the 6-plex, the 10-plex, and so on. And that's a very regional business. And, the economics depend very much on land costs, construction costs, development charges, and the rents that you can get. But I think it's fair to say right now that there's nothing here that's major for the private sector. Is this Raja? Yep. But there is, I think we continue to advocate, and that the problem is now on the radar screen, whereas for the last 40 years, as the water was boiling and you're the frog in it, you don't realize it. Well, we're at the point now where we realize that there is a problem, right? The Downsview Airport is a big site. I think they've talked about 500 units being built there. But for all the hoopla being made about these 500 units, one of our clients with a pickup truck and a couple of hardworking foremen can build that in 3 or 4 years, right? So our message is ongoing. This is the job of the private sector. Let the government build housing that the private sector is not building, and that's the more deep core and the deep need. Okay, Rod, I think that's it. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and we wish you well.